But yeah, it was fantastic. And everybody loved having cricket back.
Welcome to the fourth episode now of the Cricket Diaries podcast. It's actually starting to be a regular thing, which is really pleasing. And actually, thank you for everybody who's liked the videos, watched the videos, and those ones who subscribed. There's going to be loads of more content coming soon. So hit that red subscribe button wherever it is on the screen. I'm rubbish at YouTube. So it's down there. George says down there at the bottom. So,
somewhere down there.
somewhere down there. So hit it for us, because we can't hit anything with a bat. So hopefully you can hit the red subscribe button for us. Talking about that, we've had recreational cricket back this weekend, and we've got a superstar on the podcast, an exclusive interview with a season top score of 1. George, how was your weekend?
Best weekend ever, some may say. Some may say that. Yeah, I think what's happened is cricket's come back and I've done the whites, forgotten how amateurish I am, but within that, I ended up having a pretty good day. For me, I think people need to understand is that 1 run for me, I'm going to celebrate as if I'm Brian Lara and I've got 400 in Antigua in 2004. You know, that is the level I'm at here. So I got there. I took a swipe at a pretty fast ball. It came off the bat, surprisingly. And yeah, before my non-striking partner could even utter a yes, no, or waiting, or any sort of communication, I was 75% up the pitch anyway, so we had to make the run. And I felt sorry for the opposition because I did celebrate as if I just won the Ashes for England at the Oval. So, I mean, it looked a bit cocky, and it wasn't. It was just, for me, when you average a golden duck pretty much every week, you've got to take the small victories. But yeah, it was fantastic. And everybody loved having cricket back. Everyone had a permanent smile on their face. And yeah, I've got my life back a little bit now with it. So it's brilliant, yeah.
That's absolutely excellent. Sort of like, I'm so proud of you. So I think we should start doing like a cricket diary sort of like scoreboard. So shall we set the bar at sort of like a target of 5, or
yeah, I mean, I averaged 2
last
last season, so anything above that is going to be, and that did include a 4 where unfortunately one of the fielders tripped over the ball and it went over the boundary unwittingly. So, you know, hopefully we can have a little less luck, a little bit more skill this season, but don't count your chickens just yet.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. I can't believe it just shows how excited you are. It's how great and how much recreational cricket has been missed over the last few months. And second piece of great news we got on the podcast this week, we've been joined by Chris Stallard. Chris has been a writer for us for a few years, for over the last year. And it's somebody who's not from the South Coast. So we've got a slightly different viewpoint from the 2 Southerners here. Chris, welcome.
Greetings, thank you.
So we've just had the first test, and what a great, amazing game to be back to. Having a test go all 5 days, admittedly the first day was rain, but going through and every session being competed for and lasting that long, you couldn't really ask for anything better, even though England didn't get over the line in the end. But yeah, what a return to Test cricket.
Absolutely. I mean, I know it sounds a little bit woolly, but you touched on there, everyone's happy that recreational cricket's back, especially when the tail wags in Winchester as it did over the weekend. But as I say, it sounds woolly, but cricket really was the winner in that test match, I believe. It's just the efforts of everybody, players, coaching staff, background staff at the ground, just to get that game on. We've all suffered to a greater or lesser extent in recent months. So just to have some cricket back to watch or participate in, it really is brilliant, to be fair.
Yeah, and George, obviously you didn't see anything on Sunday, but what did you think of the Test cricket being back?
Yeah, I totally agree with Chris. I think, especially in this episode, you might hear us criticizing some elements of decision making and praising others. But when you actually look at it and take yourself away from that for a second, yeah, we all have to recognize that we had a 5 day test match that really went down as a cracker. It would be the highlight of any summer season normally. And yeah, Chris touched on it, the effort to have it back. What happened? I know a couple of people who've been working at the Aegeus Bowl, making sure that's a biosecure environment, and everybody being there, whether it was the coverage or whatever it was, everything clicked into gear. And I think people have really congregated with it being back. And whatever happened, for all England's faults and for all of West Indies' brilliance, we've got cricket back, we've got our baby back, sort of thing, and it's great. And it worked well. It worked so well.
Absolutely.
It certainly did, and I think what's really great with the opposition, I think West Indies, you can't not love them. I think they seem to be like everybody's second team as well.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a team on the up and improving massively. They've kind of been sort of like for the last 10, 15 years, quite a disjointed team. Had quite a few sort of like, obviously with the money disputes in the West Indies, people who sort of like come in and out of that West Indies team. However, this actually, and I think being in Manchester for the last 4 or 5 weeks has really helped them sort of be really cohesive as a unit. Where even though England's been training for the same amount of time, half of that training was all on their individual.
Yeah.
So I do think that obviously that did show, and possibly why they got off to a slightly faster start than what England did. But I think Jason Holder showed why, even though how much we love Ben Stokes, he is probably the number one all-rounder in the world at the moment. Just for the bowling alone in that first innings really did set the game up. And from that innings, England always seemed to be chasing the game, trying to get back into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you've both touched on there. That West Indian team at the minute, particularly the bowlers, that's a hell of a unit there. We've seen it in previous tours since the glory days of the West Indies. Even thinking back to 20 years ago, 2000, when they toured with Ambrose and Walsh for the last time. Ambrose and Walsh are obviously phenomenal, legendary bowlers, but the rest of the bowling unit were largely substandard, and they couldn't offer the support that was required. I look at the unit here this time, they're hunt as a pack. I never felt England were thinking, oh, well, if we get past Holder or we get past Gabriel, we'll have an easy couple of overs from whoever's coming on next. There was no respite for England there, really. I felt the West Indies bowled very well throughout the Test match, to be honest. And also, I'd like to say, backed up by some very good fielding, catching, ground fielding, good keeping as well. Actually, they never let up on England. Really, we never had the chance to get comfortable. I didn't think.
I totally agree with that. And I think one thing to add to that as well is game management skills, the way they saw the game, the way they react to different moments in the game. We had, due to the fact that the umpiring wasn't of the same standard because of travel restrictions, we got 3 reviews instead of 2. And I think there were 9 DRS decisions that were overturned in the match. The majority of them were by the West Indies. In that first innings, their 4 reviews were all bang on the money. They knew when to strike. They didn't do it straight away. Their communication, they ran the clock right down. The communication between captain with Holder and players was really impressive. I think England could take a little leaf out of their book, and so could other top international sides.
Absolutely.
Yes, certainly. And I think obviously we've got a few names. Obviously, the standout performers are sort of like Holder and Gabriel with the ball, Blackwood, Braithwaite, and Dowrich with the bat. But more so than individuals, they just showed how much of a team they are and how they all hunt in the pack, as you say. And actually, you look at that and just going, it's going to be a very interesting series. I think we've got some better players than them on paper. But actually, it's going to be really hard to get back into this series. And I think they're strong favourites to carry on going. especially looking at the fact that they've got Cornwall, who didn't play in the first test. Excellent spinner with the sort of like the first couple of games he's played. And as Chris mentioned in the preview on the blog post, it's a spinning wicket at Old Trafford generally. So they could even further improve their bowling unit and their bowling pack potentially. It's going to be a real challenge.
Yeah, I mean, on the batting side of things as well, I'd point out when they were chasing their target there, the Windies, they got into some difficulty at the 27th of 3, was it? Effectively for forward Campbell being retired hurt, although he did come back later on. In recent years, that batting would have easily folded. You've seen it time and time again in the last 20 years or so. Put the West Indian batsmen under pressure, and they do tend to collapse, whereas you don't get the impression that this team will collapse. I felt they played their way out of trouble very well yesterday afternoon. When a lot of sides would have wilted, they just applied themselves calmly, built the runs up gradually, and it was fairly comfortable in the end for them. Well, as comfortable as it can be on day 5, chasing 200 anyway.
I think it does show the strength and depth with the squad of the Windies there. If you look, and a lot will be said actually about England and their top order inexperience, which we might come on to later. But actually, this chase of 200 was the second time in over 110 years. Since 1902 was the only other time it happened, where the top 4 chasing a target of 100 plus didn't get into double figures. None of the West Indies top order got into double figures. I think the highest score was 9 out of their top 4. And yet Blackwood came in and played that commanding innings. Holder supported him for a while, and they were able to build around that. So that's something that's really interesting. And England could, again, learn from that, because we talk about England's top order problems, but we don't always need a top order to chase down results. It's about having that real strong middle as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And I think they have made, not only have we got to be really grateful for them to come over at first, obviously you can't have Test cricket on no matter how great a prep the ECB have done and the teams at the GS Bowl and Old Trafford. No matter how good their prep is, we couldn't have done it without them coming over. So cricket owes them a lot, to be honest, this week. And not only this week, but looking at the other nations going forward, I think we've probably really kick-started international cricket again in a post-COVID kind of world. It's probably going to be like this for a good few months, if not into early 2021, with international cricket around the world. But I just think it's so great, though, it being back.
Yeah,
definitely.
And obviously this first test with Ben Stokes, of the standing in for Joe Root, given the birth of his child. A lot of debate has been made, especially around 2 things. We go on to the sort of like the bowling selection as a second point, but a lot made of the toss, having those overhead conditions. I could kind of see why, with the pace of Mark Wood and Archer on day 4. If you have a look at it, if England hadn't collapsed and put another 70, 80 runs on that first innings score, we'd probably be looking at an England win. So then we'd be saying, great decision to bat first. But I just think that, we just, our batting wasn't strong enough. And I don't think we should be too critical on Stokes based on his decision, which actually was just let down by a batsman in that first innings.
Exactly. And I think comparing it as well, as much as I do admire and respect Joe Root, I really can't imagine Joe Root to have done anything differently than that, actually. I don't really think... I think the toss can be disputed. I think it was the wrong decision in the end. But at the end of the day, if you're going to compete to be number 1 in the world, be one of the best, the toss should not be insignificant, but it shouldn't be the barometer on which you're judged. So I think we do have to move away from that a bit. But I would have been interested to see what Root would have done, actually.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, George. Root's been criticised for being an overly cautious captain himself at times. I personally think if he'd have been leading England and he'd won the toss, he'd have made the same decision. Um, I mean, I'm not going to criticise Stokes for, you should have fielded first. It's such a rare occasion to see a team win the toss and choose to field first these days. It so rarely happens. I I could personally see the benefits behind it in the weather and the conditions were probably at their worst early in the match. Southampton as a pitch doesn't tend to offer much to the spinners even later on in the game, but we're splitting hairs really, as you've both picked up on. If we'd have batted properly in the first innings, got an extra 50 or 60 runs, we'd have probably won that game. And that is in our power, At the end of the day, the toss of the coin is neither here nor there, really, is it?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, completely. And I do feel like he worked the bowlers really well. I think he bowled himself roughly the right amount. It's very hard to get the ball out of Stokes' hand sometimes when he's bowling well. And obviously, him being a captain, it'd be virtually impossible task if he was taking wickets. But I think obviously using him as a strike bowler, like coming back into the first innings at the back end there, I think it's just a very Ben Stokes performance, and it was good seeing a Ben Stokes being able to perform and get those wickets at the end and get England kind of even a chance to come back into the game while still being the captain as well. Because, yes, obviously it's very unlikely that he will be captain again anytime soon, but oh, God forbid there's no injury, but there could always be an injury to Joe Root would take him out of a few tests. And I would be happy for Ben to step back in again.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I mean, he is the vice captain, and I think he's earned the right to be able to stand in if needed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing is, with all-rounders or bowlers as captains full stop, it's always striking a balance between the view of, oh, well, I'll show you what I want doing or I can do this, and the case of bowling yourself into the ground, which isn't what we want to see, really. I've always thought of Stokes as an impact player. He's got a certain ingredient about him, like Flintoff had, like both have had years back. He makes wickets happen. He makes things happen when it looks like nothing's happening. He's an impact player, as I say. So I wouldn't want to take that out of him by having him bowl 15, 16 overs on the trot. I don't really think that's beneficial to anybody, to be honest.
Yeah, completely. And I think one last sort of like a point on Ben Stokes' captaincy is there's been a lot of sort of like, can Stokes be a captain, given the fact that he does bowl as well? But nobody said that about Justin Holder this week. Everybody's been saying what a great captain he is. He's an all-rounder as well.
Yeah.
Very well put.
Exactly.
Now, we can't have a podcast without talking about the Stuart Broad interview this week. Obviously, he's been dropped. Some say harshly due to the fact of the amount of wickets he's taken over the last 12 months. However, I obviously in the preview of the test, I had dropped him from my team, so I can't really say it was the wrong decision because obviously that's what I had gone with. But I did feel like a little bit of some sort of like sour taste in the mouth after that interview. There's that little bit of me which is going, great that he's showing passion and wanting to obviously be in the 11. But there's that little bit of, surely you want your squad, those guys around you, to be back in fully, those 11 on the pitch. And obviously we've got, I don't know how Joffro or Mark Wood would have been feeling hearing those comments. I just felt like it put a lot of extra pressure on those, which potentially don't need from our inside of our team. We got enough from the press and Tino Best on Twitter putting enough pressure on the guys rather than actually doing it ourselves.
Yeah,
I do get that point. I know that actually on episode 1, Broad was one of the very few disagreements we did have when we did our original team selection all that time ago. But my thing with Broad, right, I actually think he's normally very supportive of the England setup. He actually defended on day 2, the morning of day 2, the selection of the toss with Stokes. He went on Twitter when Tino Best was having a go and all that, and actually defended England. At the end of the day, you've got this sort of big brother diary room style thing happening at the test matches now. You've got a camera in your face and you're asking Stuart Broad how he feels. You're asking our leading wicket taker of the last 12 months, who had one of the best batsmen in the world, Mr. David Warner, firmly in his back pocket, 7 dismissals last summer, how he feels about being dropped. I sort of respect him for being honest, because you'd be angry, you'd be upset, you would be frustrated. I don't think he was undermining the team, but I just think he is hurting, and I think it's important for people to know the battle for selection.
I agree. I mean, I'll put my cards on the table. I thought he was right to be dropped. I didn't think they would drop him, I will be honest, but I supported the decision that they made. But as you say, I mean, he's passionate. I love Stuart Broad for what he's done for English cricket, all those wickets that he's taken. That if you were dropped from the side after putting that level of performance, well, of course you're going to be disappointed. And we all show disappointment in different ways. For me, it shows that he's fired up and he wants to get back in the team and prove the selectors and the doubters wrong. And, you know, if he gets back in the side, and as a doubter, I'm proved wrong, nothing would make me happier, you know. Don't want players who just, generic, never afraid to express an opinion or anything like that. If he's passionate and he's got an opinion, by all means express it. But then alternatively, if you get your chance back in the team, well, prove us wrong and take your chance. Which
Exactly.
I do.
Yeah, and I think that's what Stokes alluded to in his post-match conference when talking about Broad. He was literally like, actually, if he comes in for the second test, then actually we'd love him to come and show us, sort of like put one up on us and just go, look, this is why you should have selected me. And to be honest, I do actually think he is going to be in that test for the second test, probably in actually, from my view, in replace of Jimmy Anderson. I think they just need to be rotated given back-to-back tests. I do think I would possibly look at Broad and Wokes coming in for Wood and Anderson, just given the fact that we've got so many tests so quickly, and the fact that they've not got match innings, sort of like overs in their legs. So, yeah, but I do think we're probably all going to be through from wrong when it comes to Broad probably going to take a fiver in the first innings of the second test, probably. But we'd all love that. So that's cricket, isn't it?
Yeah.
Exactly. And I must say, I'm a Broad fan on this. I didn't think he should be dropped. So I quite want to have the satisfaction of you guys and putting my thumbs up. So, yeah. But I could have egg on my face equally. Probably will. So,
so Chris, who are you going for the bowlers for the second test? Who are you going for?
I think there's some merit in the idea of rotating Anderson and Broad, particularly as they're both getting on in years now. As I say, a fired up Stuart Broad is a danger to any opposition, so potentially I would agree with that as a selection. Also got the thing of being dropped for one match, as that potentially focused his mind, which again could be a very useful asset for us in England. As I've alluded to, Old Trafford will turn significantly more than the pitch at Southampton. I'm confident of that. I personally think Leach is the better spin bowler at the moment, but I would absolutely state that I think Don Bess has got the potential to be the better bowler over time, which is possibly why I would continue selecting Don Bess, certainly for the second test. I mean, if they were feeling particularly adventurous, they could go for 2 spinners. I doubt they will, but that'd just be a little wild card to throw in there. Obviously Stokes in there as well, and I quite liked how Archer performed in the first test. I mean, as I said in the preview there to the second test, England in Test cricket have got to learn to use his talents better. I feel is that there's much more to his game than just attempting to bounce batsmen out. I
Yeah.
particularly like he's developing quite a nice slower ball. I think he sent one down to Campbell in the first innings. He cut the batsman clean in two. Only it missed the wicket, but it's a beautiful in-swinging slower ball there. So we need to figure out a way to best use his obvious talents, I feel. So yeah, for me, my five bowlers would be Broad, Stokes, Archer, Bess, and I would stick with Wood for now.
George?
I'd go exactly the same, but I'd put Broad in for Wood because I actually think if Jimmy's telling me that he's fit enough to play, then I'm going to play him at his home ground. The only problem is can I see him playing 3 tests in a row? I'm not sure, but if Jimmy's up for it, then him on his home ground working with and in tandem with a fired up Stuart Broad would be quite a sight to behold, I think. I think Wood didn't particularly perform badly, but there wasn't anything really to write home about either. But he'll be part of that natural squad selection we're going to get through the summer anyway. So there's going to be more chances for everybody. I think in terms of spin, totally agree from being a Hampshire member that Old Trafford, it's not going to take much to spin more than some of the wickets at the Ageas Bowl. So it will be more right for spin. I think Best deserves another chance. I think he played well. Also, batting-wise, he can hold a bat. He actually looked like our best batsman for about 20 minutes in the first innings. I actually think if you were going to play another spinner just to shake it up, I wouldn't say Leach. I'd go for Amar Verdi from Surrey, who I think is very versatile, deserves his chance. The only problem would be, could he make the tail wag? Probably not. He averages 9, I think, if that. So that's a slight thing, but maybe that would be in the third test. But I'd quite like to see him get a run out. So yeah,
I saw him in a championship game at Edgbaston last year, yeah, and he's full of variation, as you say. I mean, you're going to get 6 sort of variations and over if you do pick him there. But he's definitely one to look at in the future, certainly.
Mm.
And I think overall we have got and sort of like the squad selection for like the training showed, you've got a real good young sort of like core of sort of like 30 odd players who's got a chance. So it's been a great to kind of see some of them come through, which in different circumstances wouldn't have actually been in an England shirt even training. So it's been a pretty good summer for that if we're taking positives out of it. And just looking at the batting, I think we're kind of starting to get like a settled in England batting lineup will ever be. Obviously, Sibley and Burns played really well. Root coming back at 4 with Stokes. But obviously, there's this sort of like subplot, as George mentioned in the last episode, of the Crawley versus Denley. And I think once again, Crawley has shone through. He is the youngster. He's the one who's for the next decade, potentially. And Denley, getting out for his test average of 29 seems in the second inning seems to be a very Denley innings. Once somebody's done all the hard work to get in, you'd think they'd be then done that and then push on. He seems to do all the hard work, and when batting seems to get easier, he just loses that bit of concentration and then gets that wicket. He seems to have like this mental block of getting into the 30s and beyond. So I think that we're probably going to go Crawley at 3 for the next test.
Yeah, I can't dispute that. I mean, again, I'd love Joe Denley to get a score to prove the doubters wrong, but he's just not done it, has he? You know, I mean, still no test centuries. I think I read the other day that it's now 8 completed innings since he scored a test 50. We touched on earlier, if England had scored another 50 or 60 runs, they'd have probably won the test match. We need the batting lineup. We need people to start scoring big. You can't do it in 20s and 30s. It's just not enough. You're going to struggle to win test matches if you're making 200 first dig. So, unfortunately, as much as I would have liked it to come off for him, I think Joe Denley's just got to sit this one out, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunately the end of the road for Denley. He actually take into account his first class form for Kent over the last year as well, and then combine that with test innings. He's scored 10 to 29, 18 times in the last 18 innings. So, really, it's not good enough for top four England batsmen. And I think there's better options. I think Crawley just showed that he's more of a complete player. I have more confidence in him getting those big scores regularly. I think Denley could get a big score, like Chris said, but is it going to be consistent? I'm not sure. So I think, yeah, unfortunately, it's bye-bye Denley.
And just to then note for today's podcast, obviously we are just a couple of days out from the second test. Just having obviously again like an egg on our faces moment, as George puts it. How do you think the second test is going to go? I think for England and the series, it's going to be quite disappointing. I think actually the West Indies are going to be even better in Old Trafford. It's a place that's been their home now for the last 4 or 5 weeks. They're going to be very comfortable there. And actually, as Chris alluded to in your article with a preview, I think the West Indies' strength is in their bowling, which actually is our weakness in our batting. And I think that's going to be pretty telling again. I think it's going to be close, but I can't see beyond Windies winning this one, going 2-0 up and retaining the Wisden Trophy.
Yeah, as I suggested in the audio, I think it'll be another close run game, but I'd have to agree with that. West Indies' confidence will be sky high. We'll obviously get a bit of a boost by having Joe Root come back in, but as I really like the West Indian bowling unit. The bowlers are packed. They're very intelligent bowlers. They bowl appropriately for the situation. They're really capable of putting pressure on a batting lineup, and I think that'll be the telling factor again, to be honest. So I'd back the West Indies to win.
I'm going to make things interesting. I'm going to back England. I think we're going to see in this game, which is really interesting. We spoke last week about the subplot, Denley versus Crawley. Crawley's won that battle. The next one now is the keepers battle, Butler versus Folkes. Butler will get picked again, but it all really hinges on how he performs in this test, I think. We saw some of the old Butler in that second innings until he lost his head and got called out. But I think he's trying to go back to basics. I'd be quite interested to see how he does it on his own ground at Old Trafford. So there will be subplots there. And I think because they're batting for that selection, literally, and for people are batting for their own careers right now for England, and Root coming back, I feel that might just give us a motivational edge. But that's what I'm going to say. To try and make it interesting. I want it to go to the third test.
Perfect. And thank you guys for both joining us on this podcast episode again. If anybody has listened and watched through to the end, I'd just feel like commiserations for having to put up with us for the last half an hour. But thank you. And shall we just shout out, leave a comment below of how many runs we should challenge George to get in his next innings. So obviously we started with 1. We should give you a target, really a stretch target of 2 for your next game. But
let's go incremental.
If you want to see him more, just obviously leave a comment below.